Hi, I'm here with Marcus Kiprios, the founder of Blackland Distillery here in Fort Worth. Thanks for having me out.
Thanks for joining us. Thanks for coming into the barrel room.
So we are sitting in this barrel room, which when I first walked in here was not hot. It is starting to get hot. But that's okay, it's a barrel room, it's what we're, Texas, what can we say? So y'all are relatively new. You opened in what, March of this year?
March 20th.
March 20th of this year. So now first thing people are going to ask is, well, how do you already have products? And we're going to touch on that. But first, why Blackland?
We took the name because we are in the eco-region, the Blackland Prairie, and that runs a little bit north of Fort Worth all the way down to San Antonio. And the story is that hundreds of years ago, there were frequent wildfires in this area that made the soil black and gray. And I really like the idea that this charred soil, this burning, which is tied to the char of the barrels and what we're doing here for the flavor and the age. That's how we get the color on the spirit. And because it was the eco-region and it was tied to this region, it just made sense that we would use that as the name.
Cool. All right, so learn something new every day. We had a region called the Blackland Prairie. Probably should, growing up in Texas. But
I didn't know it either, and I grew up here.
So what kind of research did you have to do to find that?
I believe in getting a lot of help from a lot of people because this is a big operation. And so I've had great marketing teams. I've had a great design team in terms of our bottles, which are custom, and our labels. And so we explored a lot of different names, and that came up, and it just made the most sense at the end of the day.
Well, I like it. And then, so what makes Blackland unique versus some of the other distilleries? I mean, as you know, it's a popular thing to get into at this point. So what makes y'all stand out?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of things that we're doing differently here, but still trying to stay true to the traditions of spirit making, especially in bourbon and rye, because you don't want to, on the one hand, you don't want to mess up a great thing, right? And it's been made so well for hundreds of years. On the other hand, I went to culinary school in 2010. I have a sommelier background, and then I started going to some spirit schools. And I really am trying to use that cooking background as we make our spirits here to move forward and try and do things in an innovative way to create some different flavors, but again, still staying true to the process. But that said, we use fully automated stills here from Europe, and we can take a look at them. But what you see at the end of the day is we get a very clean, consistent product coming out on our alcohol, and then from the grain we're using. We use a few different grains here that a lot of other people are not using, which we can talk about. But my background, the process of the alcohol, the automated stills, and the grains, I think all combine to give ourselves a little bit of a distinctive nature in the market.
From tasting it, I can agree. Now, talking about the grain, and you just opened March 20th, so the big question is, how do you already have the product?
Sure. Well, specifically on the whiskeys, I sourced 3.5-year-old bourbon and rye from a distillery I really liked in Minnesota. And so some of these barrels here have been aging all the way back to 2016. So we're producing a blend right now. 80% is their product, 20% is our product. We started barreling last year, actually, even though we only opened in March. And then the goal, of course, is to eventually phase that out and just use our straight bourbon and rye.
Okay, so now during our conversation, learned some interesting facts. What does make some of these things unique?
Right.
Is that not only the grain that you're utilizing, but even the mash bill of what you're sourcing is unique from a bourbon perspective, and this is us geeking out a little bit.
Sure. So the bourbon I've sourced, for instance, is a very wheat-heavy bourbon. It has no barley in it. It's corn, wheat, rye mash bill. And then the rye that we've sourced is just a 100% malted rye. But then we take that a step further with our blend. And in both our bourbon and rye, we're using a grain called triticale, which not a lot of people are using. It's grown right here in North Texas. It's a cross-pollinate of rye and wheat, and I think it's a really unique flavor.
All right, and so you're producing two different whiskeys at the moment, a bourbon and a rye, but you are producing a vodka and a gin, but
of course,
the bourbon and the rye are both going to use triticale, correct?
That's correct. And
then so your bourbon, you said was what, 70% corn and 30% triticale?
Our bourbon, our straight bourbon, is actually 80% corn, 20% triticale.
And then the rye is 80%
the same.
Rye and
20% triticale. That's exactly right.
So instead of using barley, you're going to use some enzymes to help that fermentation process.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think when you taste it too, like what I really like, other than the uniqueness of the triticale, is because it's the cross-pollinate, the wheat really cuts into, the creaminess of the wheat cuts into the spiciness of that rye. And the rye, as much as I like the spice, and especially when we see these today, we see 90, 100% super ryes all over the place, which I really like, by the way. But I like that this is a little bit different.
All right, so I agree, and I think what we talked about earlier doing this was that the modern automated stills are kind of producing a lighter mouthfeel whiskey all the way around. You're also bottling it a little bit too.
Yeah.
Compared to most Texas distillers, not.
I think that's right, and that goes just to personal preference. I think the trend we see across the board in alcohol, whether it's beer or whiskey or anything, is right now everyone wants to drink less and have a little bit higher alcohol proof, right? Which is fine, but it's a give and take. And so the compromise is that, yes, I'll occasionally like my 90 or 100 proof whiskey if I'm going to sit down and have a drink, but it is a little bit harsh, and you can taste that burn sometimes. And I think with ours, you do get a little bit more of a easy drinkable product. Now, that's not for everyone, obviously. That may not be for maybe even me being the whiskey connoisseur and loving a really high proof whiskey myself. But we do a really nice cocktail program here too, and I like that people can come in and have the whiskey, have our bourbon, and have our rye neat, or have it in a cocktail that way.
Speaking of cocktails, if you were going to choose a whiskey cocktail to use one of yours in, what would your go-to be?
Well, the irony, of course, is that our most popular cocktail here is our Old Fashioned with rye. And what we actually do is make a special cut just for that cocktail where we make it 100 proof. So you can throw out everything I just said on that.
Rye Old Fashioned but it's your go-to, not the most popular.
I think it's pretty good just because we make two different bitters here that we use just to set ourselves apart and differentiate it. But cocktail-wise, I know this is we have a lot of good gin cocktails here, which is against it. Otherwise, I'm drinking my bourbon and rye on ice.
Fair enough.
Okay.
There's no wrong way to drink it. But I'm a big fan of Old Fashioned.
Yeah.
And I go back and forth between bourbon and rye, but
me too.
I do think that a higher proof does stand up better to it. So, all right, so talk to me about bourbon. Like, explain the profile of the bourbon, and we have a little bit here that we're going to sample, but, when you were talking about making this, what was it you were looking for? We already talked about the mash bill, and the proofing of it, but so kind of what were you looking for when you said, I want to make a bourbon?
Well, we had two goals. One, we had, what is our straight bourbon down the line going to taste like, and will that mesh well with the current sourced bourbon that we have from Minnesota, right? And you kind of see behind you here, I don't know if you have, we have these squirrels, which are the advanced aging tanks, right? So what we did was we put all of our grains in these squirrels. We don't use them for production, but we use it to taste and kind of give an idea of where we were going. And I've always been sort of a traditionalist. I liked the barley, but this bourbon in particular, because it was so wheat heavy, which again for me is sort of a creaminess, it reminded me a little bit of the triticale in that sense, that I just thought I liked the triticale so much that that I'm going to make this as our own bourbon, and I think it will just blend well with the current high amount of wheat that's already in there.
Okay, and now I mean, you get a lot of that grain. I mean, between the wheat, the rye, and the corn, it's not overly sweet. And one of the things we talked about earlier, because of the still, which, I mean, it's very light in the mouth. So it's got a nice finish that doesn't last too long, but it doesn't coat your mouth. It's not leaving a really oily finish to it.
I think both the corn, which is so clean, and the lighter creaminess of the wheat, what I taste after that is I can really taste the rye on the end. Like I can taste the spiciness to come through, even though there's not a lot of rye. There's not a ton of rye in there.
No, it's got a nice, you do get that kind of peppery rye finish on the end. But it's quite approachable due to the lightness of the mouthfeel of it. It's not overpowering. It's definitely something you can drink on a nice summer day.
Thanks.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah.
And then the rye is just a touch different. Obviously, because it's more rye focused. And now the rye that you're getting from the source is, it's not using any barley either.
No, it's 100% malted rye. Yeah.
And so it's definitely, it's still light in the mouthfeel, but the rye, because of the rye is malted, it's not overpowering, it's not real spicy. It just gives you just enough of that rye flavor to let you know what you're drinking. So, I mean, I agree. I mean, I think the lighter proof, the lighter mouthfeel of it is something that is a little bit unique, and I think that the modern stills are fun. I will tell you, walking in and seeing those, I was like, oh, okay, this is what modern technology is, right? I mean, it was and you have them ranging from a 1 gallon.
Correct.
Up to how big was
the 500 gallon.
The 500 gallon. Okay.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
I mean, there's a range of these things that are just like, I'm like, ooh, I really want the 1 gallon. Probably not going to happen.
You know, it comes with a suitcase, a travel suitcase.
Okay.
yes.
The stuff that y'all are putting back now, y'all are doing that grain glass here. Y'all are mashing it here, and I saw the mash tun and all that stuff. So that is something that y'all are putting back. And you said you're putting back 20 barrels a week or something like that?
A month. Yes, sorry. That's okay. We're doing about 20, 30 gallon barrels a month right now. We'll see if that's appropriate. That's always the hard part of this business too. Is that the right amount? Is that not enough? Is that too much?
But,
yeah.
Just got to let it age, you know, thing.
Correct.
But what you currently have out is the blend of your stuff plus the source stuff.
Correct.
So now y'all are in Fort Worth. Well, where at in Fort Worth?
In DFW.
So you can give somebody they were trying to find you. What's an approximate? You're close to Sundance Square.
Our location here at the distillery. Yeah, so we're in the Foundry District. We're just west of downtown. We're behind Montgomery Plaza. Everyone in Fort Worth knows Montgomery Plaza. We're right behind the Target on Montgomery Plaza, next to Doc's Records. It's actually a little bit hard to find us, but we say once you're inside the door, then you're rewarded with a really intimate, sophisticated tasting room and a great cocktail.
I would agree. The tasting room is really cool. It's very intimate, kind of speakeasy-esque. And then, so where y'all are not distributed yet?
We just signed our distribution agreement. We're about to roll out into Specs, Total Wine, Goody Goody, and then hopefully a bunch of bars and restaurants after that.
And that's going to be in the Fort Worth area.
Dallas, Fort Worth.
And then so when do you have an anticipation time when you're going to be able to expand that?
We'll hopefully be in all the liquor stores this August, and then look to expand that in the fall.
Fair enough. All right, and then what's the y'all on social media?
We are. We have both Instagram and Facebook pages, and our website is www.blacklandfw.com for Fort Worth.
Blacklandfw.com. So follow them on social media, visit the website for more information. Of course, we'll be following along and sharing what we can. But until then, cheers.
Cheers, thanks.